So again, welcome to our webinar today on demystifying the self-determination program for California residents. We are recording. That's why we have all cameras off. Questions will be answered if you type it into chat. We'll have a Q&A time, so please don't hesitate to. Sometimes when you have a question, you don't want to forget it. So just type it in and I'll keep track of them towards the end. But my name's Nicole. So happy to be here today and be with these wonderful women. I've been with Apex since February, and I keep getting distracted with the admitting people. But we're very happy to have you here today. And I want to just give a little moment to make some introductions. We have Sarah, who is the Executive Vice President of Apex. We have Susan, who is the CEO and founder of Apex Social. And then we have Julie, who is one of our speakers she's an independent facilitator and works very closely with Cathy at the Rab Lab and Education Spectrum. And Cathy is the founder of Education Spectrum and the Rab Lab. So why don't we just take a minute, Susan, if you just want to make a little introduction about yourself and a little bit about Apex Social.
Absolutely. Well, welcome everybody. I'm joining today here from Boston at Harvard at the German American Conference. And I'm very excited to be here today to have such wonderful speakers with so much know-how and knowledge to share with us on the self-determination program. We have several families in California that have been already in the pilot program and that are using the self-determination program very successfully to fund their live-in childcare. And when we start working with families, we usually recommend get your childcare in place first so you have time and space and breathing room, and you can then tackle everything that you need to tackle. So we are here. Our superpower is finding amazing people that want a career, that already chosen a career, that already completed their first part of their big picture education to work with people of all abilities. And then we provide them an exchange program of 1 or 2 years where they can join a family across the US and Australia to work with kids with disabilities. And during COVID, we also opened up an inter-American program where we now for the first time also can serve young adults that are 18 and older. So with that, I'm very excited to hear today from Julie and from Cathy. Thank you so much for your time to sharing with our families on what your experience has been and what really the game changer is here.
Thank you. Yes, and we're so excited about being able to join with Cathy and Julie to be able to help our families have more resources and knowledge to equip them. So Cathy, why don't you make a little introduction and share a bit?
Happy to do that. Thank you again for inviting us to speak today. It's something so close to my heart that I just feel like I'm just talking with a bunch of friends. So I'm a very informal person and speak from the heart. And of course, when I'm talking about my son, it's very heartfelt. We have a son who's 29 years old and been with a regional center client in California since he was diagnosed at just less than 2 years old. Actually, he was diagnosed pretty early, and had a pretty decent experience with the regional center in their traditional service program. And really what self-determination is, they call it a program, but it's really just a more modern way to deliver services through the regional center. And regional centers, for those of you that don't know, there's 21 regional centers in California, and this is how the Department of Disabilities federal dollars are distributed in our state. They're unique communities all over. We have an enormous state. There are self-determination programs now rolled out in all 50 states. It's nothing new. It's newer to California in its rollout because not only is our state so large, but it's very unique in that we have the Lanterman Act, which is the Entitlement Act. So anybody who has certain diagnoses, whether it's autism, cerebral palsy, developmental delays, and you qualify for regional center services, it's not based on income. It's based on the notion that everybody, regardless of income, socioeconomic status, anything, you are entitled to these services to live your best life and be a part of the community. And when I think about when I was a little girl, we had a neighbor, I think she had Down syndrome. And the only time I really saw her was when that little yellow bus came and picked her up, took her away all day long, and then brought her back at some hour that I had no idea. There was no inclusion. So I think about just in our lifetime, how far we've come with human rights, the rights to an education. There was no right for a free and appropriate education. So similarly in the regional center, in providing an array of services to adults, children, all ages with these diagnoses, it's not merely about inclusion anymore. It's that next step of acceptance and really elevating the general public to embrace and accept that this is the fabric of our society. And I love the word neurodiverse because it takes out any judgment into speaking of people with developmental differences. I like saying that. I just don't really like the word disability, so I try to avoid that in everything that we do. So having said that, and specific to self-determination, Julie and I have been very busy with a number of contracts with a variety of regional centers, helping with the rollout of this unique and complicated program, but fabulous. I mean, our son transitioned into this new service delivery just over a year ago, and I'm really proud to introduce Julie, who was our independent facilitator. And for those of you who already are in the regional center, I'm sure you can relate where it's really through no fault of any service coordinator. It's a very vastly underfunded system, and caseloads are enormous. And there's just no way that a service coordinator is going to be able to devote the time it takes to really identify needs and fulfill those and get funding in place. And there's vendors that you have to use. And what's so great about self-determination is you don't have to use a vendored regional center agency. You really have the freedom to pick who's going to serve your child's unique needs and put together a circle. And I know Julie's going to go into details and step by step, but it's a really gorgeous process. It is complicated. It does take patience and time, and everybody's stumbling along to try to figure this out. We're all learning together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie. I'm always available. I am an open book. I share if somebody wants to see what our spending plan looks like, if somebody wants to see what our person-centered plan looks like, all these things Julie will explain. I share everything, and I know later on you'll have my personal email, and I just think we learn best from other parents. That's been my experience. So with that, also a mom of neurodiverse individuals, Julie, I'm going to turn it over to you and have you take us through our presentation. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Cathy, for that introduction. It's been a incredible journey with Cathy and Danny. Danny was my first client, and so it's closest to my heart. But I also, aside from being an independent facilitator and working with Cathy in the Rad Lab, I'm a mom of two neurodiverse young men, and they were the ones that inspired me to be doing this work. So it is, like Cathy said, extremely close to my heart as well. What we're gonna do today is just sort of take you through step by step. We created an actual checklist that walks you through the process of self-determination. And like Cathy said, it does take patience and time, and given the way the system was set up, when she was talking about the fact that there's 21 regional centers in California who are all their own individual nonprofits, they all have decided to do things in very different ways. So what your experience might be at, someone's experience at one regional center might be very, very different at another. And some regional centers take more patients than others and have, a better systems in place. But, our hope is that, 3 to 5 years down the line, that maybe it looks different, and there's less of a little bit of an uphill road. Sarah, if you want to share the checklist. So the first, I think, step in the process would be, I think some people might just be like, well, I don't know what this is, and I just want to check out the basics. And that would be to go to your particular regional center's website, and each one should have, again, some are more easy to find and transparent than others, but each one should have a self-determination page that lists information about about the self-determination program and how to complete the required orientation, because that is the something mandatory that can't be, there's no workaround for that. Although you can use, there is now a statewide orientation that's through SCDD, which it will be on a resource page that you guys will have access to after on the landing page for Apex Social. So that each regional center has their own orientations that you can take. But sometimes the scheduling of that can be difficult, and maybe they only have it twice a month or once a month, and you can't be there. So that's why they're sort of trying to open this up and make it a little bit easier for parents to do these orientations. And we're at a point now where most regional centers will accept other orientations from other regional centers, or for sure from SCDD, they will accept that. So if you get that far and you take the orientation, and then you're interested in transitioning into the self-determination program, what you want to do is let your service coordinator know that you finished that orientation. There'll usually be some sort of certificate that you received that you can show to them. That's proof that you did the orientation. And then you're going to want to request what's called a 12-month expenditure report from your service coordinator. And this is a list of services that you've had with regional center over the previous 12 months. Even if you haven't used these services, it's going to show what was authorized for those services. And that will be the basis of your, or I would actually say a starting point for your self-determination budget. It doesn't mean that's what your budget's going to be. It means this is what's already been authorized in the traditional service system. And then you will see as we go down this list, there's a few more steps in the process where there's a possibility that we will be building up that budget through unmet needs and changes of circumstance for this particular individual or family. The next step would be, if you want to hire an independent facilitator, which you have the option of, using your service coordinator as, to help you. But like Cathy's point, they are overworked and understaffed, and really it's hard for them, I think, to truly advocate for your, the individual or the family, because it's a conflict of interest really for them to do that. So, so if you want to hire someone like myself, an independent facilitator, to help you with the person-centered plan and the rest of the transition into self-determination, there are a lot of different ways you can find independent facilitators. And the best one that we've found is, and there will be a link where it says click here on this list, where it will take you to a website called the California Self-Determination Network, which Cathy and I were part of developing. And it has pages and pages and pages of independent facilitators, and you can select filters that will help you if you want someone that's close by to you, like say you want someone that knows the resources in your particular catchment area or region. You can check that regional center, and it will only the facilitators that serve that regional center will pop up. So it's pretty cool. Or if you need a different language spoken, you can choose that. After you've chosen an independent facilitator, if that's what you choose to do, the next step would be to complete a written person-centered plan that you then submit to your service coordinator.
Can I jump in here? I just wanted to say there is funding available. I think it's up to $2,500 for that regional center provides for you to hire an independent facilitator to help you transition into the program. Sorry, Jules.
No, exactly. Good point. And it's through this, what I was referring to earlier, I think it's through this, the person-centered plan, at least for me, is the living, breathing heart of everything. And it is the basis of the development of self-determination, not just from a service delivery model standpoint, but from a notion of that it's a way of life, hopefully, for an individual to become self-determined and to make choices for themselves and to understand what those choices mean, and to have the freedom to do that and the freedom to live their own lives in a just the way any one of us does, right? And so this document is a process of discovery, and where you will come up with a lot of really amazing goals and what I like to call a roadmap for the individual. It's ongoing, right? It's not like a document that just static and stays. It evolves from year to year. And in Cathy's situation, we just did Danny's update to his person-centered plan, and it was so fun to talk about all the goals that he had met were pretty much everything. And so what do we want to do next year? What are the new goals? And he's now ticking off the boxes on that. So it's pretty amazing. So you submit this plan to the service coordinator. And I also think it helps to the point of service coordinators not having a ton of time. It helps, in my mind, to tell the story of the individual really in a really compact way, right? And it's visual usually, and mine has pictures. And so a service coordinator who might not maybe remember too much about an individual could read this document and really understand who that person is. So after you've submitted that, then you're going to schedule a review of that with your service coordinator. And it also functions as a budget meeting, right? So if you've identified in your plan that there are some unmet needs in the traditional service system, then you're going to have a discussion with your service coordinator about what these needs are. And hopefully, they'll be able to work with you on adding those traditional services to the budget to meet the needs of the individual. That meeting usually will also include the service coordinator's supervisor, hopefully, and maybe someone from the self-determination team at the regional center, if they have them. I mean, every regional center is sort of starting to slowly implement teams that are just devoted to self-determination, but some aren't quite there yet. So it could include a whole team of people, which actually is really usually great. At that point, after you've had that discussion and you have agreed on some services that might need to get added, the regional center is going to go back. Their self-determination people are going to create a budget tool for you. And again, you'll have this resource where you can click and you'll be able to see what a budget tool looks like on the DDS website. But it basically shows what I talked about earlier, which is what was on the 12-month expenditure report, which is the starting point for your budget. And then the next section might say, you know, here are the new needs that are identified. And then there might be some services that you decided were no longer applicable, and those will get subtracted, and then you'll have a total. And that total is what is going to be your self-determination budget. If you get this budget tool and your work, you know, hopefully, again, this is a place where an independent facilitator can really help you go through and make sure that the math is right, and that you know, all the services that you agreed upon in the meeting are in the list, and everything's good. If you're good with it, you know, some people say, hey, well, we still need to do an adaptive skills assessment, and so we want to wait until that's finished and we get that report and add it to the budget tool, and then we'll go into self-determination. Or if you're good with everything, you sign it, and then it gets sent to regional center and gets what's called certified, which just means that they sign it too, and then it's set. But I just want to, you know, the most important point about a budget being certified, which sounds very like daunting, I think, like, oh, it's done. It is always open for discussion. So whether it's certified or not, you can always go back to the regional center and say, hey, you know, even throughout a year, you can say, this new need just arose. We want to reopen the budget and talk about this. And you can get a new budget and get it certified again and revise your spending plan and go from there. So nothing is set in stone, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So you would then need to select an FMS, and that is what's called a financial management service. And they're the company that is the only vendored service that is required in self-determination. So they have to be vendored by your regional center, and they are the company that's going to pay the bills for you when you're in the self-determination program. You would also decide, you know, with the help of an independent facilitator and speaking with the FMS, which model you want to choose, because there are 3 different models. And there's a link here again, which has some really helpful information and details about each one of those models, and helping you figure out which one is right for you. At that point, you're going to work, you know, again, either with your service coordinator and independent facilitator to develop a spending plan. So you're going to take your total budget, and this is the fun part, right? Is decide how you what services you're going to purchase and they don't have to be traditional services. They can be if you need them and you want them to be, but they can be, you know, anything that falls under the SDP service code definitions for the program. So, and that
I want to hop in again, because this really is the fun part. And what's so remarkable is that when you're using the traditional delivery system and you're using vendors have overhead, vendors have reporting requirements. and the supported living agencies and the, from a day program to job coaches to whatever kind of services that you've accessed through traditional services, what happens is, so I'll put it this way. It was very cute when Danny first transitioned into self-determination, and he had a meeting with all of his service providers that were coming on board. He said, I have good news and bad news. I'll give you the bad news first. You're all fired. And then he said, the good news is you're all getting a raise. And one of the biggest challenges for us for all these years for Danny is that the people that are actually providing the direct service are pretty much getting minimum wage or maybe a little bit more. But the agency's getting a lot more because they have all these reporting requirements, and there's just not enough funding. So pretty much our providers, everybody that's serving Danny, either get what, there was so much money left over that we gave everybody, like doubled what, the people that stayed on board worked directly with him. So I just wanted to make a point, like that is one of, I think, the most brilliant and wonderful things about self-determination. You really get to pay people a lot more, and
yeah, and then they're more apt to stay, right? And stick around and become, I think most of us probably feel that those people become part of our family, which they are, or at a minimum part of the circle of support. So once you've developed that spending plan, you're going to submit it to the regional center, and they're going to review it and sign off on it. And they may, sometimes possible, they come back and say to you, well, we're wondering why you put this under this code, and you're that's where, again, an independent facilitator can step in and back up the reasons of why you chose certain things. So you may have to change a few things, but generally it's pretty easy process, that part of it. And all this, like, in order for you to enter self-determination, you can only enter on the 1st of each month. And in order for you to enter on the 1st of the month, you need to submit all the documentation prior to the 15th. And that actually means the spending plan needs to even go sooner, right? Because when I say submit all the documents, it's the regional center submitting the POS and the authorizations and the spending plan to the FMS by the 15th in order for the FMS to get you going on that month. So you kind of have to work backwards when you're thinking about timing, if you're thinking about when you're going to enter the program. And ideally all the staff is, there are many instances where staff does get hired afterwards too. It's not like every single staff member needs to be hired by the 15th of the month, but you need to at least have their paperwork in the works, and that's where you're working with the FMS on that. And the last step is to start living your self-determined life, and that's the best part.
So Julie, I do have a question from the audience.
Yes.
So the question was, are the hourly rates for the example, daycare, personal assistance, or respite care fixed and not negotiable? For instance, only negotiation for budget is the amount of hours versus the hourly rate? Yeah. So they're fixed in the sense, I think what you're asking is, when you're negotiating for your traditional services and building your budget, there are the rates are fixed in the sense that regional center and DDS has already determined what these rates are. And you can't say, I want more for my respite care providers in the traditional system, but you can decide to pay them more when you're in self-determination. Mm-hmm. But within those rates being set, there's still a little variation, right? Because there's different vendors providing the services in the traditional system, and they have
some have negotiated higher rates than others. And if you already have a vendor that you're using in the traditional service system, they're going to use that rate, whatever that rate is, as the number in your budget. If you don't have that and you're adding that as a new need, they're going to use what's called the, I think, the state median rate for that service code. I hope that answers the question.
And if not, please put it into chat. So if there's any other questions, please do. I encourage you to put the question into the chat, and we'll.
I think to add to that, an important piece is that you can take the overall allotted amount, whatever your negotiated budget, certified budget is, and you do have the option to pay somebody a lot more if you take that money from another service that maybe you don't need that many hours. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. Yes. You don't have to pay if your vendor in the traditional service system is, it's $17 an hour for respite. When you go into self-determination, you could conceivably pay a respite care person $22 or $25 an hour. But like Cathy said, it's like any budget, right, that we all create for ourselves. You have to figure out where you're going to take that from. There has to be, if you're moving it around, there has to be something else that gets a little less, maybe.
All right, and we have some questions rolling in. And this question is about, can we pay our international care professional under the J1 visa holder who is not authorized to work in the US except for as a au pair or care professional, and them being the host parent through the SDP funds?
Oh boy. Wait, we're just, Cathy and I are just learning about the J1 thing.
If I can chime in and maybe to clarify,
yeah.
I think the question from the legislator is, and the intent from the legislator is that you only employ people that are legally allowed to work for you. And a J1 visa holder is legally allowed to work for your family. So the answer is, yes, that person is eligible to work in the United States for your family. So that checks that box.
It is no different than any California labor law. So whatever would apply in the general California labor law when they get hired through self-determination, it's the same thing. So I think the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more questions in the chat, but Nicole, I'll let you, I think you're
we can, if you want to just answer them going down the list, and if I spot one that hasn't been hit, I'll let you know. That'll be easier. So the next one is, my son has extreme, that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking at that one. My son has extreme violent behaviors. The regional center will only provide placement, likely level 4. I want to keep him home with us. What funds would be able to transfer him? This is a great example, right? I'll let you take that, Julie, because this is the freedom to choose. Yeah,
the freedom to choose. And the idea is that you want, and it's even in the Lanterman Act, that the individual should be in the least restrictive environment possible, right? So if that means it's at home, then yes, you can use your self-determination funds to cover whatever,
And I don't know what the rates are, but I would imagine a pretty hefty budget for level 4 placement to have a really terrific team that you get to hire, handpick, and select for your loved one to, obviously keep everybody safe, and, and using funds for purchasing any kind of equipment at home that's necessary. I mean, there's just so much freedom. I know one of the links in our document is a list of the service codes in self-determination and their descriptions, and they're very different. Some are similar, but some are very different. For example, there's massage therapy, you're in a wheelchair, I mean, these are things, they're not in traditional, but you can get them. They're very creative and expansive. So that's the really exciting part of self-determination, is having that, real creativity and truly meet the needs when you have a good person-centered plan to follow. I hope that answered that question. Julie, you want to take the...
How does FMS work? Will they cover for workers' comp, health insurance, etc.? Or are these workers only considered independent contractors? Another great question. That's why there's 3 models within the FMS, right? And so the 3 models are bill payer only, which means that everyone on your team is an independent contractor. Now, independent contractors would be the service providers that you have on the team that are not directly working with the one-to-one with a person. So, an in-home care person or a job coach, those are going to be employees because you're telling them when to show up. They're clocking in and out on a time card, and they're not independent contractors. But somebody like myself, as an independent facilitator who's providing ongoing services on a monthly basis, say for Danny, where I'm my own business and I'm only providing this service virtually, and I'm directing it and I'm scheduling meetings with her, I'm an independent contractor. So if you only have, some people only have these independent contractors in their circle, and they go with the model that's called bill payer. Some people have a combination of both, and that is both independent contractors and employees. And in that instance, you go with something called the co-employer model. And yes, the FMS is at that point taking care of the workers' comp, and all the, the taxes, the workers' comp, all that stuff, which you
payroll, everything,
payroll, everything, which you have to factor into your spending plan. That's what you have to keep in mind, right? And every FMS has a different rate, it's called employer burden, and each FMS has a different rate of employer burden. And I've seen it vary anywhere from, 17.5% to 22%. So it is something to consider when you're choosing your FMS as well. I think there was one. Oh, and then there's another model called sole employer. And that is if you want to carry your own workers' comp and do all that stuff on your own, which, people definitely do. And be the employer of record and be employing hiring these people, letting them go. You can choose to do that at a much lower, you'll be paying less out of your budget to the FMS, but you'll be taking on more responsibility by being the sole employer. I think that answers that question.
Yeah, I think that is all about employment law in California. And I think one thing that I've learned studying the SDP program, it's all about helping the person who is hiring, making decisions or getting educated on what it takes to be a good household employer and what qualifies as employment, W-2 employment, and what qualifies as independent contracting. And you want to stay clear of or within the frame of local labor laws, which is very, very important.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where the FMS can help you, right? If you feel like that might be, too much for you to manage, then if you choose the co-employer model with the FMS, then they can really, they know the labor laws, so that's where they're going to step in and really be of assistance to you.
Yeah. And our families that we work with, we also have different payroll providers that help identify, at what situation and circumstances is the person that you're working with. Is it an independent contractor or is it a W-2 employee? And most people that we are working with on live-in childcare, they're all considered employees. And there's nobody that is a 1099, independent if it's an American or if it's an international person.
Yeah. I mean, an example of the independent contractor would be, like I said, someone like myself, or like a personal trainer that comes to you, meets you at the Y, or comes to your house to give you personal training sessions. They would be an independent. Or Dinah, who's on this call, she's an independent contractor and provides, nutrition support for people. So those are examples of the independent contractors.
I see that Teresa wrote in the chat when we were talking about what size a budget might be if somebody's in a level 4, if they're recommending. She's saying it could be up to $15,000 a month, and that's not necessarily all that would be in the budget, because it's based on not just what has been spent or what the rate would be equivalent, but also looking at the person-centered plan and the list of unmet needs that come up. So there's some pretty hefty budgets out there because the needs are intense and it's needed, and it's just based on need. The next question was interesting. In the au pair situation, are we allowed to pay monthly fees for the agency, not paying the provider through SDP budget? And I certainly would think so. Julie, where
are we allowed to pay monthly fees for the agency not paying? You mean I think I need some clarification on, you're hiring an agency to provide your workers and they're asking you to pay a fee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I think, I would think so.
that sounds like similar to that RUMI program that
Yeah.
We've seen that happen. Absolutely.
It's just two different line items that you put in the spending
Right.
plan.
Yeah,
with
it would
another
be,
independent facilitator who has done it for different families. And they basically have line item 1, agency fee, and then you put the money for the agency fee, and there's line item 2, employee name from the employee, and then you put all the rates that you're paying towards that towards that employee, and then you put your benefits there, and you put your anything that you pay for, I don't know, any benefits that you're offering on top of the base salary.
Yep.
We have just a few more questions. Yep.
Claire asked, are funds allotted equal for every child? Absolutely not. And it's not, the last year's budget or the last year's expenditure report is just, as Julie said, a starting point. And then it goes from there after the person-centered plan is completed and submitted. And what is supposed to happen, sometimes has to get negotiated, is that all the identified unmet needs are factored in. But remember, and I think this is going to help answer the next question a little bit, it's still the regional center. You're still subject to the same boundaries, limitations in terms of exhausting generic resources first. For example, if you have IHSS, which is a different funding source, and you're using those hours for, overnight hours, then you cannot factor in, paying somebody for overnight hours in self-determination. Or if you have health insurance, and that can pay for maybe therapy or OT or things like that. Now, tutoring, community activities, that's, unless, again, there is some generic resource through a parks rec or something, they're going to want you to exhaust that first. So the same laws do apply.
Yeah, and especially when we're talking about a child, someone under 18, they're going to want the school district to be the first generic resource that pays for things like OT and tutoring, and that has to be exhausted first. But there are if you have a budget, you can include some of those things after those resources have been exhausted.
Well, and Danny was tongue thrusting, and then his teeth got buck again, and we spent a fortune on braces when he was a kid, and there was teeth removing. So we do have good medical insurance, and Danny got Invisalign, but they only covered a certain percentage, and so we were able to put into our spending plan the balance of what the Invisalign cost, and then through his spending plan they picked that up, which was great. Thank you, Julie.
Sure. What's the next question?
Oh, she's looking for SDP service codes. I don't see personal care supplies.
It's there. It's a specialized medical equipment and supplies.
The next one is, how is this all applicable to someone like my son who lives in a group home?
Is SDP applicable to someone like my son? Oh, no, this is a good question.
Yeah, really good.
It's really about, at this point now, about, I think, final rule compliance. And generally, I know there are exceptions with some group homes that are HCBS compliant, but generally, no. You would have to be transitioning out of that group home and moving into your own living situation. Do you think that, Cathy, do you think I mean,
well, without looking at the law, I mean, there are limitations. You can't be in like institutional living. So, and I'm not that familiar with group homes, but what we're talking about is a huge shift in the law right now that is going to be fully enforced, not just in self-determination, but for anybody on waiver, basically Medicaid dollars, which is certainly regional center dollars, where you can no longer be in these segregated environments where you are told that dinner is served at 6 and this is what's for dinner. You have to be able to decorate your own room and be able to lock the door and have privacy. Like it's very detailed and complicated. That's a whole other webinar. But in self-determination now, already you have all the providers have to be compliant with these new laws and really empowering and clients' rights, I think is really the intent.
Yeah, I think conceivably down the road, when these residential facilities have to meet this final rule, then I think it might be a different story. But right now, if you're going into self-determination, I think the majority of them don't meet it, so you couldn't use self-determination funds for them.
And it looks like we have one more question before we wrap it up here. Once you have everything set up with FMS, how much accounting and paperwork do parents have to do on an ongoing basis?
Such a great question. And so you have the option of keeping an independent facilitator. It might not be the same one that you use to transition. It could be, or it doesn't have to be. You factor them into your spending plan for, a certain number of hours that you might need their help. Very little for me. And then the part when the paperwork kind of came up again, and then Julie, of course, is on the team to handle these kinds of things, is to renegotiate the budget and redo the spending plan for the following year. And we had to start doing that about 4 months before his annual IPP. But sometimes we bring a new staff person on, but that's not really paperwork I'm doing. I do approve all the invoices, and Julie's authorized to approve them in my absence as well. And of course, Danny is. So once a month, everybody submits their, the independent contractors submit invoices and basically just say approved and send. So very little. That's a good question.
Yeah, I think it also depends probably on the FMS. I think some have more paperwork than others.
Karen, I'm happy to, because I think this is a complicated issue, and I don't want to give you the wrong information. So if there, I know that we have I can put the email in the chat, but I'd like to get back to you about this question and talk to you in more detail about it. I'll just put my email in here right now.
Yeah, I think I didn't realize that it was that you had bought a home and you were having it I think in my mind, I was thinking about the few that I do know about, right? It sounds like maybe there's a way for you to create that, to have that be HCBS compliant right off the bat, and then it's not an issue, and you could use self-determination funds.
And then I have heard from parents that have done this successfully, so I'm happy to chat offline about that as well. I have one more question here from Laura, who messaged me directly, so Nicole doesn't see the question. Are there any time frames imposed on the regional center staff to respond on the PCP, the budget, etc., so the process is not held up? I'm worried that the SDP clients will be pushed to the last priority.
Yeah, so I understand your frustration, and unfortunately, there are no deadlines at the moment. I mean, there are the deadlines within the traditional system on getting answers, but right now, and this is what we're trying to do in our contracts and helping regional center, is develop these processes and timelines in a way that isn't so frustrating for everybody. Because I feel your pain. So unfortunately, there are no legal timelines set up for that right now.
I think your email went to me directly.
And then I sent it to everyone. So
there it is down there.
I saw that. I know you are in a network of independent facilitators that you meet with regularly. Can you give people a sense of how long does it take these days? I mean, I'm sure it's a big range, but what is that range?
Yeah, so
depends on the regional center.
It truly depends on which regional center you're working with. And I think I would say probably the bigger the regional center, the longer it takes. I would say at a minimum, it's 3 months, and at a maximum, it might be 8 months. At North LA, I've had up to a year, I think, actually, sadly. But at a regional center like Westside Regional Center, 3 months, I would say, average. So it's anywhere in there. Average 6, I would say.
Yeah.
You need patience.
Can you share from your experience from working with people that entered the SDP program, if they're glad they did, or is there any that's like, oh God, I wish I would never started this?
I don't have anybody. Everyone is that from my experience, everyone of my clients who are in the program are living amazing self-determined lives, and I don't have anybody that's come to me and said, I wish I didn't do this.
I think there's the one part that's completely out of our control that has been, I think, one of the biggest frustration points are that there aren't enough FMSs out there, and they don't get paid a whole lot. And some of the FMSs, one was forced out and had to fold because they weren't paying their bills. So all the parents had to change. I was lucky and hadn't chosen that FMS. So we've had a very good experience, but that has been a tough issue, but it does always seem to get resolved eventually.
Yeah. And to Cathy's point, I have a client that was with, and she's had to go through 4 different FMSs this year. One left the state. We had to switch to the one that Cathy just mentioned, went out of business. Now the state's FMS that's taking over to pay those bills for 3 months before his first SDP year ends is another one. And then but they're not sticking around. They're only paying those bills. And then the new one that we just, but I will say that the parent in this situation, she's gone through all this, right? All these fire drills, and she has nothing bad to say about self-determination. So I think even those hurdles are worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the good news here, is that it is better in self-determination, even with those obstacles that, you know, the system is still working through, and it's normal. I mean, if you're talking about a government system that takes some time to train people at the regional center, and even if everybody puts their best foot forward, there's just not repeatable and systematic processes in place yet everywhere. You know, it will.
It will.
Think if you look at other states, I got educated a little bit on the other states. Some states, they're 100% on self-determination.
Yeah. I mean, I like to call it the wild, wild west, right? We're in California. It's the West. And this is a brand new program, and we are forging new territory, right? And when you're in a covered wagon headed towards the West, you're going to go through a big, huge bump, and a wheel's going to fall off the wagon, and you put it back on and just keep going forward. So that's kind of how I look at it as an independent facilitator.
Well, thank you, Julie and Cathy, so much just for being our key speakers and being so helpful. And, you know, we're constantly looking to add value and helpful information. So Cathy put her email in there for some questions. We're also going to provide a resource page as well as that checklist and PDF down. You'll be able to download them once we put the recording up. We'll put it all together for you and send it out for you to access. And then if there are any questions, you know, we're all here to help. So please feel free to reach out. I'm going to stick my email out there as well. And if you have any other topics, because we have a lot of parents online right now, they're all parents. So if there are other topics that you feel would be really helpful for you, please just send me that information, you know, and via email. We'd love to hear your input to be able to serve you better. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate your time today.
Nicole, I put Danny's, I sent